Welcome in, everyone, to my week two edition of favorites and fades here on Fantasy Football for the People. My name is Ryan Larson. I write for both Rotoballer and Yards Per Fantasy, while also being a part of the expert consensus of rankers over at fantasypros.com. I'm here to give you my own little version of the love hate list every single week. And I've got six guys that I'm trying to get into my lineups this week, six guys that I'm avoiding if possible. Last week was about the most bonkers opening weekend of the NFL that I think we can all really remember, not just for NFL purposes, but for fantasy as well, with plenty of major names that you spent tons of high draft capital on. Absolutely just falling out, giving you zeros, giving you 5 point weeks, giving you less than 10 point weeks at the quarterback position, and crushing your first week of the fantasy football season. So I think the industry as a whole is a bit rattled at the moment, and we're going to try and rectify that this week. But first off, we're going to quickly run through my favorites and fades from last week and identify which ones are hits, which ones were misses, if any of them were kind of a wash. I think it's very important that us in the fantasy industry, us, people that call ourselves fantasy experts or are labeled as such for where we work for, are transparent. And I don't think really that doesn't happen very much. So, real quick, my favorites that were hits last week, in my opinion at least, Miles Sanders was the RB22. Yes, I projected a higher output from Miles Sanders, but still, he needed to be in everyone's lineup as an RB2 at the very least. And that's what he was drafted to be anyway. So I think he was a good play. Mike Evans, wide receiver 13, had a massive week for Tampa Bay against the Minnesota Vikings, catching the touchdown, getting 66 yards, 10 targets. I think the worries about Mike Evans are fading a little bit at this point. He needs to be in everybody's lineups, and he was gotten at a wide receiver 3 price for a lot of teams, so it was a good pickup. And then Luke Musgrave at the tight end position finished as a tight end 10, top 10. I had him on there as more of like a deeper league option, and he produces a top 10 option, and I think he's going to continue to be a weekly streamer. So if you picked him up, I highly recommend keeping him. On to the misses last week. Javonte Williams finishes the RB 33. I still think that you could consider this a wash, but I'll consider it a miss because I'm sure that many people that played him weren't ecstatic about what he was able to do. But I was very encouraged by what we saw. So hopefully you will continue to still put Javonte into your lineups, especially in good matchups. Chris Godwin, one of the receivers for Tampa Bay, just didn't pan out, and it was Chris Godwin this past week. Finishes the wide receiver 44. Weren't very happy with what he gave you, but I think you're still going to be able to play him almost every single week, depending on the matchup. And then Jahan Dotson, wide receiver 48. Just didn't work out. The process was sound. The Washington offense just did not look good last week, and I'm still very excited to have Jahan Dotson, a season long. I think he's going to actually produce as we move forward, but last week just didn't work. And I'm considering Derek Carr a wash at QB 14. He was still a top tier streamer, the number 2 streaming option inside the top 15, but because he didn't finish in the top 12, I will consider him a wash. And then we're on to the fades. I only hit on 2 fades last week. We got DeAndre Hopkins, finished wide receiver 29 when he was ranked inside the top 24, sometimes top 20 by the East, depending on what format you played in the ECR. I said to pretty much fade him. You didn't have to fade him. You could flex him if you had to, but I went with other options. And then Treylon Burks, wide receiver 72, absolutely did not pan out. However, misses were big last week in terms of 2 players in particular, and that was the Indianapolis Colts players that I put on the misses, the fades list. Anthony Richardson, QB4, Michael Pittman, wide receiver 7. Absolutely wrong on this whole situation for Indianapolis. Offense looked better than expected, and I think at this point, I'm not worried about starting any of these top tier Indianapolis players like Richardson and Pittman. I still think you're going to have some inconsistency, but nowhere. I don't think their floor is as low as I was initially projecting, which is good. It's good. It's great for fantasy. Another good QB option to stream and play, and another wide receiver who was drafted later that becomes a value. Alexander Madison bailed out by the touchdown finish as RB18. If he didn't get that touchdown, this would have been a hit for me in the fades last week, but finishes inside the top 20. I'm not going to consider that a hit. That's a definite miss on my part. Still worried about that whole situation, by the way, especially moving forward with how the Vikings offense looked in week 1. And then Pat Freiermuth finished as the tight end 9, literally caught one ball for a touchdown, but that got him inside the top 10. So it was looking good for a while. Caught the touchdown there towards the end of the game and bailed you out if you did decide to start him. I don't expect wanting to play tight ends very often against the 49ers defense, but we're going to try and continue to get better every single week. So let's dive right into the favorites for this week. And we're going to start at the quarterback position. Jordan Love at Atlanta. Jordan Love was the quarterback 3 last week without his most dangerous weapon, which is Christian Watson. Christian Watson missed with a hamstring injury. Again, while Watson is likely out this week, the passing attack, it's most likely not going to need him against Atlanta. Atlanta's defense was able to stop a putrid Carolina passing attack last week, but they will face a Green Bay passing attack that put up 3 touchdowns last week against Chicago, again, with no Christian Watson in it. We could see Love finish with a very similar stat line in week 2, and he's my absolute widely available favorite streaming option in week 2. I think you can get him in almost any league as long as he wasn't picked up on the initial waiver claims this past Wednesday. And I think that if you have one of these lower end starting quarterbacks or ones that you drafted super late, Jordan Love is the perfect pivot option for week 2. Running back, Jamaal Williams at Carolina. Many were really disappointed, myself included, in the outing that Williams had last week. But what I saw in terms of the volume that he got was very encouraging heading into week 2. Former line was given 18 carries. And with the only other running back on the team to touch the ball being Tony Jones Jr., who got 1 carry. Tennessee's defense is great against the run, so he was getting stonewalled for most of the game. Carolina, however, they were just manhandled by Atlanta. And I know Williams isn't Bijan Robinson. He might not even be Tyler Algier at this point. But we saw Jamaal Williams score 17 touchdowns last year with Detroit, and I think he's pretty much a near lock to get a touchdown this weekend against Carolina. I'm sorry, that's the Monday night game. This Monday against Carolina. So if you got him, he's most likely your RB3. I would find a way to get him into your flex. I think he has high upside this week. Number 2, Zach Moss going up against Houston. I was, again, down big time on the Indianapolis offense last week, and they kind of slapped me in the face with a great showing by Richardson and Pittman. However, their run game was putrid, and that was one of my big fears as to why Anthony Richardson may not succeed game 1. Deion Jackson, he's nothing but a jag, and Evan Hall's now going on to the IR. Now in comes Zach Moss, who last season had 69 carries for 334 yards and a touchdown over the final 4 games for Indianapolis, averaging 4.8 yards per carry, 4.8 yards per carry with a horrible, immobile quarterback under center. Moss should return in the lead role this week against Houston's defense that was horrible against the run last year, and they just let up 3 rushing touchdowns to Baltimore last week. So he's a phenomenal flex this weekend if you picked him up off of the waiver wire. Moving on to DJ Moore against Tampa Bay. After last week, many are hitting the panic button on the entire Chicago Bears offense, but I'm here doubling down on the offense, going to have a bounce back this week. DJ Moore had 2 targets last week. 2 targets. The Bears' game plan was to force Justin Fields to be conservative and check the ball down, but I do not see that happening again this week. Fields already addressed this to the media, saying that, you know, the offense was way too conservative. And that means that this is going to be an offense that's going to target more downfield, with DJ Moore being that main target. I see him kind of getting the squeaky wheel treatment against Tampa Bay, and they were getting eaten up by the Vikings passing attack last week. So I know that you're going to want to bench more. A lot of people are going to try and find better options, play a Puka Nacua or someone they picked up off of waivers or made a trade for. Don't play DJ Moore this week, and I don't think you're going to be disappointed. Excuse me. Moving on to Zay Flowers at Cincinnati. Zay Flowers proved last week that he is just that dude. Okay. OBJ looks so much slower in comparison to him. Rashad Bateman was playing a completely complimentary role last week, and there was no Mark Andrews. So one of those 2 guys is going to drop off even more in target share moving into week 2 with Andrews back. Flowers had a phenomenal debut last week. but he was the wide receiver 3 or 4 for many fantasy teams. So we're going to be making the choice here of, do we continue to find a way to put him into our lineup and flex him, or go with other options that you drafted higher? And I say that this week you try to find a way to put him into your lineups. And if he balls out again, you're finding a way to put him into your lineups every single week moving forward. The return of Mark Andrews is nothing to be afraid of, in my opinion. More pieces for the defense to cover is only going to help someone with the speed of Flowers get wide open and take advantage of defenses. So even in a tough divisional matchup on paper, I view Flowers as a fringe or wide receiver 2 this week. I think he's got some top 15 upside, especially if he finds the end zone. My final favorite for the week this week is tight end Hunter Henry. It's crazy what the Patriots offense was able to do after they got an actual offensive coordinator calling plays. Going up against a Philadelphia defense last week that was in the face of Mac Jones pretty much the entire game, finding a way to get the ball out very quickly, short passes in less than 2 seconds of the ball being snapped. And Hunter Henry was the guy that really capitalized on those, other than Kendrick Bourne, that is. So it was a great, strong showing for their offense, and it's kind of giving us a glimpse of which New England players we can spot start moving forward in good matchups. And this is one of those matchups that you want to target against Miami. He was the number 1 overall tight end last week. He had 6 targets, 56 yards, and a touchdown. Philadelphia, yes, they're going to struggle to cover the tight end all year. Their linebacker core is weak. But this matchup against Miami is arguably just as good, if not better, for the fantasy tight end position. So if you've got him or you picked him up off waivers to stream, put him in over pretty much anyone that you have that wasn't one of those top end Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson type tight ends this week. Let's move on to the fades. We got Dak Prescott against the Jets. Now, I want to preface this because I have the Eagles hat on and everyone's going to think, oh, he just hates Dallas. Not true in terms of fantasy. I'm not going to placate that and have biases towards it because I'm not a Dallas fan. Last week, we can't fault Dak for his fantasy performance. His defense literally did all the work for him, and it was probably the easiest win of his career in terms of what he actually had to do on the field to get to that win. However, this week, I don't want anything to do with him in my lineups against the New York Jets defense. They just forced Josh Allen to throw 4 turnovers, and I understand that Dak is a completely different quarterback than Josh Allen. But Dak had the turnover issue last year. I know that usually that's just an outlier for quarterbacks when they have one really bad year with a lot of turnovers, but we haven't been able to see that proven yet because last week he barely got to do anything. So I think the play calling is going to be fairly conservative for both offenses in this game. And since Dak, didn't cost fantasy managers a ton of draft capital a couple of weeks ago when they put him on the team, I don't think there's a reason that you need to force him into your lineups in a really tough matchup like this one. I would rather stream Jordan Love, a Brock Purdy, even Mac Jones in that matchup against Miami. I think although those 3 players have higher upside than Dak Prescott does this week. Running back, Najee Harris versus Cleveland. Man, Najee's stock has taken such a hit over the past year compared to back in 2021. No longer demanding a massive target share. Harris is just struggling to stay afloat for fantasy purposes as an RB2, especially in tough matchups. So this week, it's not an exception as the Steelers are hosting their division rival Cleveland Browns in what should be an absolute bloodbath. Harris got just 6 carries last week and now faces a defense that held the Bengals run game in check until the final quarter since he literally threw in the towel and pulled Joe Burrow from the game. So Najee's flexible, but you've really got to adjust your expectations on his potential output, and not just for this week, but moving forward entirely. Moving on to my second running back fade of the week, we have Cam Akers. I'm not sure there could have been a more inefficient performance for a running back than what Cam Akers did last week. 22 carries for 29 yards, just over 1 yard a carry. I mean, he scored a touchdown and it still bailed him out, but he was the RB26 with the touchdown. He didn't even rank as an RB2, even though he was able to find the end zone. That's hard to do. So from what we saw, when given the opportunity, Kyren Williams is the much better option, and he profiles as more of the pass catching back out of him and Akers. So against San Francisco, who just shut down Najee, and Najee, even in his current state, is a much better running back than what Akers is. I would find a way to avoid Cam Akers at all costs this week. Moving on to the wide receiver position, we got Drake London going up against Green Bay. Legitimately, this may be the only time that I talk about Drake London on this particular list of favorites and fades all year, and it's not because I'm going to want to talk about him in the good category. I think he could potentially fall out of flex territory altogether due to the nature of Atlanta's offense. I know it seems overreactionary, but while the entire league is shifting to a pass-first approach, Arthur Smith is running the ball with phenomenal efficiency with two great backs, and they're winning football games. So they're not going to change the way that they run their offense. Falcons threw 18 passes last week. They didn't even hit the 20 mark in terms of total passes thrown. That's not even completions. Talented wide receivers like London can thrive in low pass volume offenses for fantasy. We've seen it done in the past. But they've got to have a good quarterback under center, and Desmond Ridder is not that quarterback. So until further notice, I'm off Drake London until he shows that he can find a way to produce in this extremely low volume offense. Moving on back to the Miami game, JuJu Smith-Schuster going up against Miami. This matchup is great, and I will not deny that. Many people are going to have Juju in their lineups and think that he's going to have the chance to be in a blow-up spot, but I'm not into it. Smith-Schuster looked like he was the third to fourth read on this Patriots offense last week when they threw the ball at a much higher rate than we're expecting them to throw against most defenses. He looked slower than every other weapon on the team, and he was outproduced by a sixth-round pick in Demario Douglas with the exact same target share and reception total. So I just think Juju is slowing down, and I don't think that he is a viable flex option moving forward unless the matchup is phenomenal. And I'm even telling you this week, in a matchup against Miami, which should be a high-scoring affair, I think you can do better and find better options. So move on from JuJu Smith-Schuster if you can. Maybe if he has a good week this week, you can trade him. But I'm not starting him if I have the chance. Last fade of the week. Tight end Tyler Higbee versus San Francisco. Higbee was the most popular waiver wire option last week, and most likely he's still going to be on a ton of rosters, even after a really middling performance that didn't give you much. The whole tight end position didn't do much last week, but the hope for Higbee to have a big game really, really was felt, and he didn't give it to you. All the targets that we thought were going to go to him really went to Puka Nacua, who had 15. And it propelled the Rams to a blowout win. So I don't think the philosophy is really going to change this week, especially against a tough opponent like San Francisco. I am going for guys like Hunter Henry, Luke Musgrave, even Zach Ertz off the waivers over Tyler Higbee this week, and you can safely drop him to pick up one of those guys if you're looking to pivot to a better option this week. And that's going to do it, guys. That's my favorites and fades for week 2 of the NFL season. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe. It helps me out a ton. And you can join us every Thursday for our live Q&A show that we do where we go over my rankings, go over some, sneaky start sits options, kind of another thing like this where we're going to talk about more guys that you can start and sit or you should fade. And just kind of answer your guys' questions. We can run it for about an hour, and it's a great time to be a part of it. So please come check that out, and we will see you guys next time.